Little girl walked into the office and asked, "Where can I buy a dad?" The Millionaire CEO cried. It was just another morning at Ellison Ventures, a place of cold coffee, billion-dollar deals, and men who forgot how to feel. But that day, something happened that no quarterly report could explain. A 5-year-old girl walked into the lobby, barefoot, carrying nothing but a stuffed rabbit and a question that shattered the silence. "Where can I buy a dad?" Security didn't know what to do. The assistant froze, and the man who ran the empire, Grant Ellison, ruthless, distant, untouchable, was brought to his knees by 6 words. Who was she? Where was her mother? And why did her little voice sound so much like someone he once loved and lost? This isn't just a story about wealth. It's about what happens when you're forced to remember the people you abandoned, the promises you broke, and the child you never knew was yours. Stay with us as we follow a man who thought he had everything, until a child reminded him what it meant to stay. If this opening moved you, hit like, share with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe so you don't miss the full journey. Now, let's begin. It was just after 8 Nora when Grant Ellison stepped through the glass doors of Ellison Ventures, coffee in hand, suit pressed to perfection. The lobby smelled like eucalyptus and ambition, every surface polished to reflect his reputation. He liked mornings. They were controlled, scheduled, predictable, just like everything else in his life. Grant's shoes clicked in steady rhythm as he crossed the marble floor. His assistant, Liza Harmon, was already waiting by the elevators, tablet in hand, her mouth forming the start of his daily rundown, and then he saw her. A little girl sat cross-legged near the reception desk, right next to the towering indoor ficus tree. She didn't belong there. Her sneakers were scuffed, the laces frayed. She wore a faded denim jacket over a white cotton dress, and a cartoon backpack sat beside her, zipped shut with a purple ribbon tied to one side. Grant's steps slowed. The girl wasn't crying. She wasn't even fidgeting. She just looked around the room as if she'd been waiting for someone to notice her. No one had. Executives walked past her in heels and cufflinks. Security glanced, hesitated, then looked away. Reception shifted nervously, unsure if she was lost or part of some social experiment. Grant found himself walking toward her before his mind caught up. He crouched down slowly, the floor cold through his tailored trousers. "Hey," he said gently. "Are you okay? Are you here with someone?" The girl looked up at him, and for the first time in over a decade, Grant Ellison felt something sharp twist in his chest. Her eyes were wide and startlingly blue. Not frightened, not pleading, just certain. "I'm here to buy a dad," she said. Grant blinked. He'd faced hostile takeovers, federal subpoenas, and Fortune 100 rivalries, but nothing, not even the moment his father died, had ever rendered him completely speechless. "I'm sorry," he said after a beat. "What did you say?" The girl adjusted the ribbon on her backpack and repeated, calmly this time, "I want to buy a dad. I brought coins." She opened the small front pouch of her bag and held out a folded paper towel. Inside it were exactly $4.23 in quarters, dimes, and one flattened penny that had clearly been run over by a train. Grant didn't know whether to laugh or cry. "What's your name?" he asked instead. "Wren," she replied. "Wren Hollis." He paused. "Hollis." She nodded and added, "My mom's name is Nora. She's really sick, and she told me sometimes, when you need something real bad, you have to go ask the world for it." Grant's breath hitched. Nora. That name wasn't unfamiliar. It lived in a dark, folded part of his memory, alongside the scent of pine dorm hallways and the ache of unread letters. "Where's your mom now?" he asked quietly. Wren's voice dropped. "At home. We don't have a car. I took the bus here by myself." Grant stood up slowly. The world around him felt oddly tilted. Liza approached, her heels clicking with concern. "Is everything all right, Mr. Ellison?" He didn't respond, not to her. Instead, he turned back to the girl who had somehow shattered the shell of his morning. "Come with me, Wren," he said softly. "Let's find out how we can help your mom." Wren got to her feet without hesitation. She picked up her backpack, looked up at him with a kind of hope that was too pure for this building, and simply nodded. Inside his executive office, she sat on the couch while Grant poured her a cup of warm tea from the break station. He added honey, stirred it with the same spoon he used every morning for his own, and offered it to her like it was the most normal thing in the world. She held it carefully, then said, "You look like someone my mom used to talk about." He didn't move. "Your eyes are the same," Wren added. She had a picture of a man in a college sweater, said his name was Grant. That was when the room stopped spinning. He sat down across from her, hands clasped. "Wren," he said slowly, "how long has your mom been sick?" "Since the cold days started," she answered, "but she hides it. I can hear her crying when she thinks I'm asleep. And you really came here alone." I followed the number she once wrote in her notebook. She said, "It had your name next to it." Grant closed his eyes. He hadn't seen Nora in over a decade. They'd met in college. He left for London on a fellowship and never looked back. No goodbye, no explanation, just silence and ambition. Until now. "Wren," he asked carefully. "How old are you 6?" she said. "Almost 7." Grant's breath caught again. He did the math. She watched him silently, the way only children can. She didn't rush him. She just waited. After a moment, she leaned forward and gently placed the coins on the coffee table. "I know it's not enough," she whispered, "but I hoped someone might still say yes." Grant stared at the little pile of coins, the warped penny on top, $4.23, and somehow it was enough to undo everything he thought he knew about himself. "I'll take you home," he said quietly, "right now." She nodded, stood, and reached up, her tiny fingers wrapped around his index finger, holding it with quiet certainty. The elevators opened. The staff stood frozen. But Grant Ellison didn't stop. For the first time in 15 years, he missed a meeting. And for the first time in his life, he felt like he was heading in the right direction. The car ride across Evermere was quiet, but not empty. Wren sat in the back seat next to Grant, still holding his finger like it was a lifeline she didn't plan to let go of. The driver, trained to remain invisible, kept his eyes on the road, but Grant noticed him glancing at the rearview mirror more than usual. He didn't blame him. Wren didn't fidget. She didn't hum or ask questions like most 6-year-olds might have. Instead, she watched the buildings change, her gaze tracing the city's shift from glass and steel towers to cracked sidewalks, older brick, and shuttered storefronts. Her small backpack rested on her lap like a treasured possession. "Is it far?" he asked after a few minutes. She shook her head. "Not really. Just past the donut shop with the yellow sign. You'll see a mural of a lion on the side of a building. That's our street. Grant had driven these roads before years ago, before he made his first million, before his name was etched on office doors and elevator walls. But back then, he'd been different. A kid with plans, messy ideas, a borrowed car, and a girl named Nora who believed in him long before anyone else did. He swallowed hard. "Wren," he said carefully, "does your mom know where you are?" She tilted her head. She was sleeping. She doesn't sleep well, so I didn't wake her. Grant paused. "And you took the bus here alone." "She told me the number once," Wren answered, "and I remembered it. You were her friend a long time ago. I hoped you could be mine now." Something about the way she said it, softly, plainly, with no expectation of being owed anything, hit Grant harder than any investor showdown ever had. This little girl wasn't trying to manipulate him. She wasn't rehearsed. She was just tired, brave, and clearly used to doing things on her own. They turned the corner near a chain-link fence and a half-abandoned playground. A mural of a lion, exactly as she described, loomed on the side of a red brick building. The paint had faded in parts, but it still looked fierce. "That's it," Wren said. "The third door on the left. The buzzer doesn't work." The car slowed, then stopped. Grant hesitated, his hand already on the door handle. He didn't know what he expected. He wasn't sure if he was ready for any of this. But some decisions aren't made. They're accepted, as if the moment arrives before the permission does. He stepped out, walked around the car, and opened the door for her. Wren slid out, her shoes landing lightly on the pavement. She grabbed his hand again without asking. They climbed a short staircase, the metal railing rusted at the base, and Wren reached into her backpack. From the side pocket, she pulled out a small key on a beaded string and fitted into the door like she'd done it 100 times. The door creaked open into a dim, narrow hallway that smelled faintly of old carpet, laundry detergent, and something slightly metallic. She led him in. The apartment was quiet. One window near the kitchen was cracked open an inch, letting in a small breeze that pushed the curtains gently toward the ceiling. On the floor were a few scattered toys, a stack of library books, and a worn couch with an old quilt folded over one side. The space was clean but tired, lived in by someone who spent more time surviving than decorating. Then he saw her. Nora. She was asleep on a reclining chair near the far wall, curled into herself beneath a light blanket. Her hair was longer than he remembered, but thinner. Her face was paler. A glass of water sat on a tray beside her, half full. Next to it, a bottle of medication with a yellow cap. She stirred at the sound of the door. At first, she didn't react. She blinked, adjusted to the light, and then her eyes found his. Everything went still. "Grant," she said. Just one word, heavy with disbelief and something older, something worn down, like a hope that had once burned hot and then been buried beneath years of ash. He couldn't speak. Wren walked over and gently placed her hand on her mother's arm. "Mommy," she whispered, "I brought someone. Don't be mad." Nora sat up slowly, her body visibly protesting the motion. She looked from Wren to Grant, her eyes narrowing slightly, as if the image of him might disappear if she blinked too fast. I didn't know," she started, her voice barely audible. Grant finally found his voice. "I saw her in my lobby. She said she was looking for a dad." A silence stretched out between them. Wren sat cross-legged on the floor, pulling out one of her books and flipping through it like this was the most normal thing she'd ever done. "I didn't send her," Nora said quietly. "I know," he replied. "I didn't even know she remembered your name." "She did," he said, "and she found me." Nora exhaled, closing her eyes for a second. "You look exactly the same, except different. I could say the same." Her lips twitched, just barely, a shadow of the smile he used to know. "How long have you been sick?" he asked. Voice lower now. She didn't answer right away. "Long enough," she finally said. "Fatigue, fevers." It started slowly. Then came the diagnosis. "Why didn't you tell me?" Nora looked at him. Something old and sharp behind her eyes. "Because you disappeared. One day you were flying to London, and the next you were just gone. No return, no letter, no phone number that worked. I thought you made your choice, so I made mine." Grant felt something inside him collapse a little. "And Wren," he asked. "She's mine, isn't she?" Nora didn't speak. She just nodded. He sat down on the edge of the couch, hands clasped, staring at the floor. "I had no idea." "I know," she said. "I didn't want to raise her with bitterness. So I just said her dad had once lived in the clouds, and she could find him if she ever needed him enough." Grant lifted his gaze to her. "She found me." "Yeah," Nora whispered. "I didn't think she actually would. I can help." Nora looked away. "We're not charity. I'm not offering charity. I'm offering what I should have offered years ago." Wren looked up from her book, then crawled into her mother's lap and rested her head against her chest. Nora brushed her fingers through her daughter's hair. Slowly, rhythmically. "I'm not going to disappear this time," Grant said. "That's easy to say. I mean it." Nora looked back at him. "Then start by not running away from the mess." He nodded, eyes never leaving hers. "Deal." In that moment, surrounded by dust particles and warm window light, nothing felt clean or resolved, but it felt real. And sometimes, that's how stories begin again. Not with fireworks, but with two people admitting they're still broken and choosing to sit with it anyway. Grant didn't sleep that night. He tried. God, he tried. But the images wouldn't let him. Nora's hollow cheeks, Wren's quiet voice asking if coins were enough to buy a dad, the way the apartment smelled of old wood and survival, the tremble in his own hands when he realized the 6-year-old who held his finger was his daughter. He sat in his penthouse living room, lights dimmed low, staring out the floor-to-ceiling windows of Aram Heights. The city lights blinked back like stars trying to be relevant. Normally, this view comforted him. It was power, proof, precision. Tonight, it felt irrelevant. He had built all of this elevators that responded to his voice, kitchens designed for chefs he never hired, a master bedroom that could fit an entire studio apartment inside, but none of it held what mattered. That tiny apartment in Fallridge did. He had a daughter, and he hadn't even known. He closed his eyes, leaned back on the couch, and exhaled sharply. Guilt crept in quietly, as it often does with men who are used to controlling every outcome. This wasn't a failed investment. It was a life. A little girl who had grown up without a father, while he'd been across the city thinking the hardest thing in his world was whether to take a company public or not. He remembered Nora the way she had been in college, fiery, brilliant, fiercely independent. She had challenged him in ways no one else had. She wore her ethics like armor, refused to laugh at rich boys' jokes, and once told him, "Ambition without humanity is just a dressed-up form of greed." He hadn't listened back then, He hadn't said goodbye either, just left for a fellowship in London and let the silence take its place. And now there was a little girl with his eyes, who counted bus coins and thought the world might still be fair enough to give her a father if she asked politely. When morning came, Grant didn't head to the office. He didn't call Liza. He packed a weekend bag, got into the back of his town car, and told the driver, Fox Ridge Estate. The driver blinked. "Sir, you heard me." Fox Ridge had been a weekend property, barely used, too quiet for his tastes. It had belonged to his grandfather and was inherited during a time when Grant thought silence meant weakness. Now it felt like the only place where anything real might grow again. He stopped at Nora's apartment before noon. Wren answered the door. She didn't smile, but her eyes lit up. "You came back. I said I would." She stepped aside, letting him in like she owned the place. Nora was sitting on the couch, wrapped in a fleece blanket, flipping through a medical folder. She looked up. "You didn't have to come today. I did." He crossed the room slowly, sat in the worn armchair across from her. "I have a place. It's quiet. Outside the city. There's a lake, clean air. A doctor can visit daily. You can rest." Nora hesitated. "I'm not asking you to move in with me," he added gently. "I'm asking you to let me help you heal in a place that isn't crushing you." She swallowed hard, her hand twitching at the edge of the folder. "I don't know how to accept this," she said. "Start small," he said. "Come for a weekend. No pressure." Wren looked up at her mom. "Please." That was all it took. They packed lightly. Nora barely filled a duffel bag. Wren brought her sketchbook, her bunny with one ear missing, and the same backpack with the purple ribbon. Grant carried everything downstairs himself, ignoring the looks from neighbors who definitely recognized his face from magazine covers. The ride to Fox Ridge was quiet. The farther they got from Evermere, the more the city melted into hills and trees and old barns faded with time. Grant drove himself this time, something he hadn't done in years. It felt grounding. Both hands on the wheel. No Bluetooth interruptions. No silent pressure to appear composed. Nora sat in the passenger seat, resting her head against the glass. Wren hummed softly in the back, tracing shapes on the fogged-up window. Fox Ridge sat at the end of a winding road, a two-story home framed by oak trees and ivy. It had wraparound porches, oversized windows, and a wood-burning fireplace that hadn't seen flames since his grandfather passed. The place smelled like pine, old books, and opportunity. Wren stepped inside and immediately kicked off her shoes. She wandered the front room, trailing her fingers along the edges of the furniture. "It smells like warm wood," she whispered. Grant smiled faintly. "It's real cedar, not the fake spray kind." Nora stood by the door, hesitant. "It's beautiful," she said, "but it feels like we don't belong here." "You do," he said without hesitation. She looked at him carefully. "You're trying so hard." "Why?" He hesitated, then sat on the staircase step. "Because I ran once. I convinced myself I had to. And I've lived with that choice every day. You don't forget a silence that big." She didn't respond. "Let me make space now," he said. "I'm not trying to fix everything, just trying to be present." She nodded, slowly, then sat beside him on the step, and they watched as Wren tried to figure out how to turn on the fireplace. That night, they had soup and toast, nothing fancy. Grant burned the bread once, and Wren laughed until her juice came out her nose. Nora laughed too, a raw, unexpected sound that made Grant's chest ache. Later, after Wren was asleep in the guest room, Nora stepped outside to the porch. The stars were brighter than she remembered them ever being. Grant followed her, 2 mugs of tea in hand. "Decaf," he said, handing one to her. She accepted it wordlessly. They stood in silence for a while. "I watched you on TV, you know," she said at last. He looked over. "You looked sharp, untouchable, like someone I used to know, but from a different planet. I didn't like who I became," he said quietly. "Then why did you stay that way? Because the alternative meant facing everything I left behind, and I didn't think I was strong enough to survive the regret." Her eyes softened. "Well," she said, taking a sip, "maybe now you are." He didn't respond, just let her words settle. "You're good with her," she added. "She doesn't trust easily." "I know," he said, "and I'm not going anywhere." Nora looked up at the stars, then at him. "She's going to ask soon. Ask why you weren't there when she was born, when she had her first cold, her first lost tooth." "What do I say?" Grant swallowed. "You tell her I was lost," he said, "but she found me." And Nora, after a long pause, nodded. The morning at Fox Ridge began with rain. Not the angry kind, but the soft, steady sort that made the world feel slower and quieter. Wren was the first to rise. She padded into the kitchen in mismatched socks, rubbing her eyes, and looked around like she wasn't sure if the dream of yesterday had held through the night. Grant was already at the stove, trying to make scrambled eggs. He was failing. The texture wasn't right, and he'd somehow added too much salt. He caught her staring and lifted the spatula sheepishly. "Don't tell anyone," he said, "but I might be better at contracts than cooking." She grinned faintly and climbed onto a stool. "You tried," she said. "That counts." Nora appeared in the doorway a few minutes later, pale but cleaner than she'd looked in weeks. She wore one of Grant's oversized flannel shirts and had tied her hair back in a loose braid. She looked more alive somehow. Still tired, still sick, but lit from within by something steadier. "Morning," she said softly. "Hey," Grant replied, flipping the eggs again. "You okay?" "I slept. That's good." "No," she said. "I mean, I really slept, like, through the night. I don't remember the last time that happened." Wren looked up at her mother, then back at Grant. "It's because the house is quiet," she whispered. They sat down to eat, the 3 of them, at the long wooden table in front of the window, outside. The rain tapped gently against the glass. Wren poured juice with careful focus, as if afraid to spill, while Nora cut the toast in half and slid a piece toward Grant. There was no big conversation, just clinking silverware, small nods, and the kind of silence that held more peace than awkwardness. Later that day, a doctor came to the estate. Her name was Dr. Mireya Chen, a former ER physician who now did in-home care for patients with complex needs. She was kind but direct, asked questions that Nora answered truthfully, and took notes in a small, leather-bound tablet. Grant watched from the corner of the room, his arms crossed tightly, feeling like an intruder in his own house. He didn't like the sound of medical terms, didn't like the way Nora winced when her blood pressure cuff tightened. Most of all, he hated the list of medications that filled 2 full pages of Dr. Chen's notes. She needs stability, the doctor told him privately, and less stress. The illness isn't terminal, but it's serious. You bought her time by getting her here. Now you have to help her use it." He nodded, jaw tight. "I'll cover everything," he said. Dr. Chen smiled, not out of gratitude, but recognition. "Good," she said. "But that's not the hard part. What is staying?" He didn't answer. That night, after Wren was asleep and the house had quieted again, Grant found Nora in the den, sitting on the couch with a cup of tea in her lap. The room was lit only by the lamp on the side table, casting a pool of warm gold across her face. "You okay?" he asked. She didn't answer right away, just stared at the tea. "I forgot what this felt like," she said eventually. "What, having someone else in the room, just being there, not fixing, not leaving, just existing with me." Grant sat down in the chair across from her. His voice came out low. "I should have been here sooner." "I know," she said, "but that's not the part that hurts the most." He waited. "The part that hurts," she said, eyes steady on his, "is that I stopped believing you ever would." Grant swallowed hard. The silence pressed between them, not cruelly, but truthfully. "I tried to find you once," she added. "When I found out I was pregnant. What happened, I called your old number, got a voicemail that wasn't yours, wrote a letter, never heard back. Eventually, I stopped trying. I had to. I never got it," he whispered. She gave a small nod. "I figured." There was a pause. "And Wren," he asked, "did she ask about me? She used to draw pictures. Nora said one of them had a dad with wings. She said maybe you lived in the sky." I didn't correct her. "Why not? Because I didn't want her to hate someone she didn't even know?" Grant looked down at his hands. His knuckles were pale, fingers tight. "I've built 1,000 things that felt impressive," he said quietly, "but none of them mattered yesterday. Not when she walked into my office with that paper towel full of coins." Nora closed her eyes. "She's stubborn like you. Once she makes up her mind, there's no stopping her. I noticed." They both laughed, softly, unexpectedly. After a while, Grant asked, "Do you hate me?" Nora looked at him, not with anger, but with exhaustion. "No. I just don't know if I believe you yet. That's fair. I don't need saving. Grant, I need someone who'll stay when the days get ugly. I didn't come back to be a hero," he said. "I came back because not being here hurt worse than anything else." She nodded slowly. "Then be here." They sat in silence again, not out of avoidance, but because some wounds don't need immediate words. They need room. The following morning, Grant canceled a week's worth of meetings. Liza left 3 voicemails and a dozen texts before finally messaging. "Tell me you're alive. And if you're happy, tell me that too." He didn't respond right away. Instead, he made pancakes, burned the first batch, let Wren add too many blueberries to the second. Nora leaned on the counter watching them with one eyebrow raised. "This kitchen was probably designed by a Michelin chef," she said. "And here you are making edible chaos." Grant laughed. "It's a start." Later, he found Wren in the sunroom drawing. She was hunched over her sketchbook, tongue sticking out in focus. "What are you working on?" he asked. She turned the book toward him. It was a picture of 3 people. A woman with long hair, a man in glasses with messy brown hair, and a little girl in a purple dress. They were holding hands under a blue sky. She'd written one word above their heads, family. Grant didn't say anything. He just reached down, gently brushed a lock of hair behind her ear, and whispered, "Thank you for finding me." and Wren, without looking up from her drawing, whispered back, "Don't get lost again." It was the following Monday when Grant did something he hadn't done in over a decade. He walked into his boardroom late. The glass conference room at Ellison Ventures buzzed with tension. Half a dozen executives had already begun the quarterly overview, spreadsheets projected onto a screen, graphs climbing upward like good behavior. Grant's absence had been tolerated for 72 hours. Beyond that, it became boardroom gossip. When he entered, silence dropped like a curtain. "Sorry," he said calmly, adjusting the cuff of his shirt. "Family matter." Liza gave a subtle nod from the far end. No one else spoke. He didn't explain. He didn't need to. He sat down, opened his notepad, and listened. But his mind wasn't in the numbers. It was on Wren curled up in the sunroom that morning, her hair tangled from sleep, asking if he'd be back by dinner time. He'd said yes. He'd meant it. But sitting here now, surrounded by people who once defined his every move, he felt the pull of two realities. This world, the boardroom, the empire, the bottom line had made him. The other one, the little girl with blueberry-stained fingers and a mother fighting quietly for her breath, was teaching him how to actually live. He left the meeting early. When he walked out, Liza followed him into the hallway, shutting the door softly behind her. "People are wondering," she said. "I'm aware. They're speculating." She added, "About the girl, about why you've missed calls, why you're showing up late, why you left mid-briefing to pick up someone from school." He met her eyes. "And what do you think?" She hesitated, then replied, "I think something real finally matters to you, and they don't know how to process that." He nodded once. "I'm not asking you to justify it," she said, lowering her voice. "I'm asking how much you want me to protect." "All of it," he said. "As much as you can." That afternoon, he took Wren to her first pediatric appointment in years. The clinic was clean, the nurse gentle, but the moment they asked for her insurance card, something twisted in Grant's chest. She didn't have one. Nora had been paying out of pocket when she could. She hadn't applied for state aid, likely out of pride. Wren had received vaccinations through school clinics, but beyond that, no consistent care. He looked down at the clipboard, the questions on allergies, emergency contacts, and coverage. Then he handed it back blank. "Send everything to me," he told the nurse. No paperwork for the mother. They ran the standard tests, checked her height, her hearing, her weight. She was slightly undernourished, a bit anemic, but otherwise healthy. The doctor said she was resilient. That was the word she used, resilient. Grant stared at Wren sitting on the exam table, swinging her legs. Resilient shouldn't be a compliment for a child. It should be a tragedy in disguise. He drove her home slowly, watching the road with one hand on the wheel, the other holding the small drawing she had given him before the appointment. It was a picture of him and her walking down a hallway together, and above their heads she had written, "It feels safe when you're near." He didn't speak the rest of the drive. When they returned to Fox Ridge, Nora was on the back porch reading. She looked up when they arrived, her face tight with unspoken questions. He handed her the doctor's summary and said nothing. She read in silence. "She needs better nutrition," she said. "I'll bring in someone," he replied. "We'll set a routine." Nora glanced at him. "You're acting like you've been doing this for years." "I haven't," he said. "But I should have been." That night, after Wren had gone to bed and the dishes had been washed, they sat in the den again, lights low, voices softer. "I'm scared," Nora said quietly. He looked up. "Of what? That this will all disappear. That you'll remember who you were before all this. That I'm just a project you feel guilty about." Grant didn't answer immediately. He stood, walked to the fireplace, and stared into the coals still glowing from earlier. Then he turned around. "I don't need a reason to care about you," he said, "or her, but if you need one, here it is. I didn't lose you once. I let go. That's on me, but this time I'm holding on, even if my fingers bleed." She blinked, but didn't cry. "You still know how to say the exact right thing," she said. "It's terrifying." He smiled faintly. "It's not scripted." "No," she whispered. "That's what makes it worse." The next morning, everything changed. A photo was published, somehow through someone's lens, someone's slip, or perhaps just fate. A picture of Grant carrying Wren into the pediatric clinic appeared in a local business tabloid under the headline, "Ellison's Secret Life Mystery Child and Sudden Absences Raise Questions." Liza called him within minutes. "Don't panic," she said, "but it's out." Grant sat on the porch steps, Wren playing with sidewalk chalk on the driveway. He scrolled through the article with a sinking feeling. There were no names, no confirmation, just a caption, speculative and cruel, hinting at illegitimacy, scandal, corporate instability. He didn't feel shame. He felt fury. He looked at Wren, hunched over a heart she was drawing on the stone. She glanced up at him, then back at her chalk. She didn't know yet, and he didn't want her to. Inside, Nora was holding the same article on her phone. "I didn't say anything to anyone," she said instantly. "I know," he replied. "Do you think it was your board? I don't care who it was. What do we do now?" Grant didn't flinch. "We protect her. Can you—" "Yes," Liza called again. This time, she didn't start with a greeting. "The board wants an emergency call," she said. "They're nervous. Let them be. They're saying if it's a paternity issue, you could be open to lawsuits. Let them try." Liza paused, then said, softer, "I'll stand with you." He ended the call and exhaled. Later that night, he sat with Wren while she drew at the kitchen table. He watched her fingers move with careful strokes. He thought about lawyers, about narratives, about investors who only cared when things looked clean on paper. Then he looked at the child in front of him. Real, messy, magical, and knew he wouldn't trade this chaos for anything. That evening, he opened his laptop and drafted a message to the board. It read simply, "I have nothing to explain. My priorities have changed. If that's a problem, I'll leave the board tomorrow, but I won't apologize for becoming the father I should have been. Choose what matters to you. I already have." He didn't hit send yet. Instead, he walked upstairs, peeked into Wren's room, and saw her asleep. One hand curled around the stuffed bunny that had survived more than it should have. He stood there for a long time, breathing in the quiet, anchoring himself to it. It rained again the next morning, but this time it didn't feel quiet. The storm rolled over Fox Ridge with heavy wind and steady sheets of water that beat against the old windows and soaked the grass outside until it looked like glass. Inside, the house felt warm, but not at peace. Grant sat at the dining table, laptop open, fingers hovering over the send button on his message to the board. The statement was bold, final. a line in the sand. It told them exactly where he stood. It told them who he was now, but he hadn't sent it. Yet. Wren was upstairs, curled under blankets, reading a chapter book she'd checked out from the library. Nora was in the guest bathroom brushing her hair, the strands thinner than they'd been the week before. Every movement looked slower, more deliberate, like she was rationing energy. He heard her cough again, muffled behind the closed door. He closed the laptop without sending the message. For the next few hours, he kept busy. He fixed a broken latch on the porch screen, answered 3 urgent emails from legal, approved a payroll adjustment for the foundation his company had sponsored last year but forgotten about. But none of it mattered. Not really, because beneath all of it, something inside him was shifting. It wasn't just the guilt anymore. It was grief, preemptive, crawling, unforgiving grief, the kind that doesn't wait until someone is gone, the kind that starts the moment you realize they might not stay. Nora came downstairs around noon. Her lips were pale, her steps slower than usual, but she smiled at him and said, "Wren wants grilled cheese, and I want to try eating real food today." He nodded, grateful for something tangible to do. While the sandwiches cooked, Nora leaned against the counter and watched him. He could feel her gaze, steady and quiet. "You're thinking about leaving the board," she said. He didn't respond right away. She continued, "You haven't said anything, but I can tell. You've been pacing more. You answer texts like they're landmines." He turned off the stove and sighed. "They want a clean CEO. No drama, no secret child." "She's not a secret," Nora said. "She's your daughter. I know that. You know that. But they care about image. So what happens if you stay, they'll want statements, damage control, maybe even a DNA test to confirm paternity, just so investors feel better." She flinched, just barely. Grant lowered his voice. "I'd rather walk away from it all than subject either of you to that." Nora stepped forward. "Do you know what scares me most?" He looked up. "That you'll disappear again. Not because you mean to, but because you'll think it's what's best for us." He exhaled, jaw clenched. "I'm not leaving." "You say that," she said, "and I believe you mean it. But part of me still doesn't know if I'm just the chapter you're trying to fix before turning the page." He swallowed hard. "Everything I thought I was the man who built this life. This company, it's all built on control," he said, "on staying ahead of the pain, on never getting too close. But I don't want to be that man anymore." Nora's expression softened. He continued, "When I was 17, my dad died of a heart attack in front of me, in our driveway. I was the one who found him, and I remember kneeling beside him, feeling like I was frozen in time. That was the moment I decided I'd never let myself need anyone again." Her eyes welled. She didn't interrupt. "I pushed everything down," he said, "buried it under degrees, deals, power. It worked for a while, until your daughter sat on my lobby floor with $4 and a dream that I might be worth trusting." A tear slid down Nora's cheek. "I've spent every day since trying to be someone she wouldn't regret finding," he finished. She walked forward, took his hand. "You already are." Later that day, they sat together in the sunroom, watching the storm ease into light mist. Wren was asleep on the rug, a half-colored drawing beside her. Grant gently picked up the paper. It was the 3 of them again, this time under an umbrella. Above their heads were 3 words, "We don't quit." He smiled, then looked at Nora. "She gets that from you. She gets a lot from you, too," Nora replied. "The stubborn parts, the need to win, the way she watches people when she thinks no one's looking." He chuckled quietly. "She's smarter than both of us. She's 6. Exactly." The next morning, Grant drove them both to Nora's follow-up appointment with Dr. Chen. Wren came along this time, sitting between them in the back seat, humming to herself, at the clinic. Nora was led into an exam room while Grant and Wren waited in the small reception area. The chairs were uncomfortable, the air too cold. Grant kept glancing at the closed door like it might open early with bad news, but it didn't. When Dr. Chen returned, she looked calm, focused, hopeful. "The scans show a small reduction in tumor size," she said. "It's not a miracle, but it's progress." Grant let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. Nora sat quietly, absorbing the news. "You'll still need treatment," Dr. Chen continued. "But if this pace continues, we may avoid a second round of aggressive chemo." Outside, under a gray sky that was beginning to brighten, Nora looked up at Grant and said, "I didn't think I'd ever have anything to hope for again." He looked at her and replied without hesitation, "Now you have a future, and I want to be in it." Back at Fox Ridge, the mood lifted. Wren made paper crowns for them to wear at dinner. She demanded that they eat like royalty, even if it was just leftover soup and crackers. Nora wore her crown proudly, her laughter coming easier now. After Wren went to bed, Nora joined Grant on the porch again. She held a blanket over her shoulders and watched him silently for a while. Then she said, "You're not the man I used to love." He stiffened slightly. "But that's a good thing," she added. He turned to her. "You used to need to win. Now you just want to stay. That's what love really is, Grant. Not the fire, the choosing." He nodded slowly. "Then I choose this. Every time." She smiled, and for the first time, it wasn't bittersweet. It was real. The power went out just after sunset. A gust of wind swept down from the hills, rattling the windows of Fox Ridge and shaking loose a few early autumn leaves. The lights flickered once, then vanished. Everything sank into shadow, the air holding its breath. Grant was in the study when it happened, going over a binder of Wren's school enrollment documents. He'd been trying to find the right district, the right support, the right everything. He always approached decisions with spreadsheets and pros and cons columns. But parenting didn't come with a rubric. It came with crayons left on the floor and the sudden panic that she might wake up coughing, and you'd need to know what kind of medicine was safe at 2 a.m. He found a flashlight in the kitchen drawer, lit a few candles, then walked through the hallway. The silence wasn't uncomfortable, but it was heavy. In the living room, Nora was curled beneath a quilt, her hands clutching a notebook. Wren had already fallen asleep on the couch beside her, curled like a kitten, her hair spilling over the cushions. "Power's out," Grant said softly. "I figured. You okay?" Nora nodded. "This place feels like it holds its own warmth. Not like the apartment. That one went cold the second the lights went." He sat down on the rug near her feet. The candlelight flickered, making her face look like something from an old photograph. She looked tired but steadier now. The treatments were starting to work. Her cheeks had a little more color. Her voice didn't tremble as much when she stood too quickly. "You were writing something," he said, glancing at the notebook. She hesitated, then closed the cover slowly. "Just some thoughts. Things I never got to say. To me, to you, to Wren, to myself." Grant looked down at his hands. "I have a box," he said quietly, "in my closet. It has 3 letters I wrote but never sent." She looked at him, surprised. "One from the airport," he continued. "One from London, after the first year, and one after I saw your name in a fundraiser newsletter 2 years ago. I didn't know it was you at first. Then I saw a photo and couldn't breathe for a full minute. Why didn't you send them cowardice?" he admitted. "Control? I told myself it wouldn't matter, that it was better to leave things untouched than to disrupt your life. Is that what you thought you were?" "A disruption. I didn't think I was allowed to be anything else." Nora stared at him in the soft glow of the candle. "I kept a letter, too," she said. "Yours, from the last day of college, the one you wrote before you left." He blinked. "I didn't think you kept that. I read it once a year, on the anniversary of the day I found out I was pregnant." A hush fell between them, thick as velvet. "Do you want to read it again?" she asked. Grant didn't respond right away, but then he nodded, and she opened the drawer of the side table. From inside, she pulled a folded, creased envelope, yellowed at the edges. She handed it to him. He hesitated, then unfolded the paper. The writing was his, younger, less sure, but unmistakably him. The ink was a little smudged, like it had been read with tears nearby. He read aloud, voice just above a whisper. "Nora, I don't know how to leave without losing something. You are the best thing I've ever known, and it scares me that I don't know how to love you the right way yet. This fellowship is everything I worked for, but you are everything I didn't know I needed. I hope this isn't the end, but if it is, please know that you changed me in ways I'll never be able to say aloud. I'm sorry I didn't say goodbye in person. I couldn't. I was already breaking. Grant." By the time he finished reading, he couldn't lift his eyes. Nora wiped at her face gently. "I hated that letter for a long time," she said, "because it felt like it said everything and nothing at once. I didn't know how to say more. You do now." He nodded. "I do." She opened her own notebook. "There's something I want to share with you, too." She flipped to a page toward the middle, then began reading. "Dear Wren, if someday you grow old enough to wonder how it all happened, why your dad wasn't around in the beginning, I want you to know something. It wasn't because you weren't wanted. It was because life got tangled, and people got scared, and sometimes we don't know how to fix the things we break. But your dad didn't forget you. He didn't even know you were there. And when he found you, he didn't run. He stayed. That's what matters most. He stayed. Love, Mom." Grant looked at her. "Are you writing a book?" She laughed softly. "Just memories, in case something happens." He reached across the blanket and took her hand. "Nothing's happening yet, and even if it does, you won't be forgotten." She let him hold her hand without pulling away. "You're not who I expected you to become," she said after a while, disappointed. "Not at all. I just thought you'd be harder, colder. I was," he admitted, "until a girl with a backpack and $4 asked me to be someone better." They sat in that silence for a while. The rain softened, the wind moved on, the house settled into stillness. Later that night, long after Nora had gone to bed and Wren had mumbled something about ice cream in her sleep, Grant walked into the study again. He turned on his laptop, opened the message to the board. He read it through once. Then he deleted it. Instead, he drafted something new, not defiant, not dramatic, just honest. To the Ellison Ventures board, You're right. My priorities have changed, and that's not a threat to the company. It's a promise to myself. I will lead with the same strategy and focus that built this business, but now with greater humanity. If that's uncomfortable, then maybe we need to rethink what leadership looks like in the world we're trying to build. I'm not stepping down. I'm stepping in fully. And yes, that little girl in the photo. Her name is Wren. She's my daughter. Respectfully, Grant Ellison. He clicked send. It was the first time Wren had ever been inside a skyscraper. She stood quietly beside Grant in the mirrored elevator of Ellison Ventures, clutching her sketchbook against her chest and staring at her reflection as the numbers blinked overhead. Floor 27, floor 28, floor 29. Will there be people like you? She asked suddenly. Grant turned to her. What do you mean? People in suits who forget how to smile? He laughed, softly. Probably a few. She nodded seriously, then went back to watching her reflection. It had been Nora's idea. She's part of your life now, she'd said. You can't keep her a secret, not from the people you lead. And maybe, he thought, not from himself either. When the elevator doors opened, the entire floor went quiet. Executives at their desks looked up, analysts froze mid-keystroke, and Liza, standing near the glass boardroom, blinked like she'd seen a ghost. Grant stepped forward, one hand resting gently on Wren's shoulder. Everyone, he said evenly, this is my daughter, Wren Hollis. There was no dramatic pause, no justification, no PR angle, just the truth. The silence broke in awkward waves. Some nodded politely, others looked away, unsure how to respond. One or two smiled with something real in their eyes. Liza stepped forward with ease, her heels tapping across the polished floor. She knelt slightly to Wren's height and offered her a quiet smile. Welcome, she said. I'm Liza. I make sure your dad doesn't forget to eat lunch. Wren considered this, then said, You're doing a good job. Liza grinned. I like her already. They walked down the corridor, passing offices with frosted nameplates. Wren peered into each one like she was cataloging the world of grown-ups. Grant let her set the pace, ignoring the buzz of whispered curiosity that trailed behind them. In his office, Wren walked straight to the window and looked out. It's like being on top of a cloud, she whispered. Grant stood beside her. Feels different from the ground, doesn't it? She nodded, but smaller too. All the people look tiny. He said nothing, just followed her gaze as she traced the city skyline with her finger. Then she turned to him and asked, Did you always work up here? For a long time, he replied. Did you ever come down? He looked at her. Not until you showed up, he said quietly. She took a seat on the couch while he reviewed some documents Liza had stacked on his desk. Emails, shareholder memos, a response draft to the article that had gone viral. The headline was still fresh in his mind. The CEO and the child. What Grant Ellison didn't say. He crumpled the printed article and tossed it into the trash. I don't want to be a story, Wren said suddenly. He looked up. You're not. They made it seem like I was a problem. You're the reason I remembered who I am. She studied him for a long moment, then went back to her sketchbook. Her pencil moved across the page with soft, patient strokes. Later that day, as he prepared for a scheduled shareholders' call, Liza entered the office with a look that made his stomach turn. Grant, she said, it's not good. What now? There's a group on the board calling for an internal review. They're citing leadership distraction and potential reputational risk. They want you to take a leave of absence." He stood slowly. "Who's behind it?" "Peters, Doyle, a few others who never liked how much control you held." Grant's jaw clenched. "They want to appoint interim leadership, reevaluate the direction of the brand." He paced the room once, then again. "I've spent 15 years building this place," he muttered. "I gave them everything." "Exactly," Liza said, "and now they want to remind you it was never really yours." He looked toward the couch. Wren was asleep, her head resting on her sketchbook, a pencil still in her hand. His daughter, here, in this tower, in his world. And now that world was threatening to push her out like she didn't belong. He turned to Liza. "I want a boardroom meeting. In person. This afternoon." She nodded, already texting someone. An hour later, Grant stood at the head of the long, cold glass table, the city stretching out behind him like a painting. Half the board was present. The other half attended via video, their faces small and pixelated. Doyle cleared his throat first. "Grant, this isn't personal. It's about optics. It's always about optics," Grant said, "until someone reminds you that people still matter. You've been distracted. I've been awake," he corrected, "for the first time in years." Peters leaned forward. "We understand there's a child involved and that it's complicated, but there's no but." Grant interrupted. "Her name is Wren. She's my daughter, and she's the reason I won't let this place become a machine that treats compassion as a liability. Your personal transformation isn't our concern," another board member said dryly. "Your responsibility to this company is—" "And what is this company if not an extension of the people who lead it?" Grant asked. "What does it say about our vision if we punish leaders for growing?" Silence followed. He looked around the table. "I'm not taking a leave. I'm not stepping down. And if anyone feels uncomfortable with that, you're free to step aside." The room stayed still. After the meeting, he walked back into his office, exhausted but certain. Wren looked up from the couch. "Did you win?" He knelt in front of her. "Doesn't matter," he said. "I stayed." That night, back at Fox Ridge, Nora was sitting on the porch when they arrived. "You look like you aged 10 years, she said. He sat beside her, leaned his head back. "I had to fight to stay," he said. "It wasn't just implied. It was demanded, and I fought back." She didn't speak for a while. Then she said, "You're not the man I knew before." He would have folded or vanished. "I almost did, but you didn't." He shook his head. "I looked around that room and realized this isn't about one company. It's about how many places punish people for showing up fully." She looked at him carefully. "You showed up for her. I'll do it again tomorrow." It was a Tuesday when Nora fainted in the kitchen. Grant had just finished brewing coffee. Wren was coloring at the breakfast bar, humming to herself. The birds outside had just started chirping again, the early autumn light stretching in soft golden fingers across the floor. And then, without warning, Nora's knees buckled. She collapsed silently, like a tree given in to its roots. The sound of her hitting the floor wasn't loud, but it was enough. Wren's humming stopped. Grant was at her side before the mug even shattered on the tile. "Nora," he whispered, checking her pulse, steady but faint. "Nora, stay with me." Her eyes fluttered open briefly. I'm okay," she said. "Just a moment. Dizzy." But he was already dialing. They took her in an ambulance. Wren clutching his hand the entire ride, silent and pale. At the hospital, everything blurred flashing monitors, wires, doctors speaking in quick, clipped language. Dr. Chen appeared an hour later, her face unreadable. "It's not a full setback," she said carefully, "but it's a reminder. Her blood levels are off. We need to adjust her treatment aggressively this time. She'll need to stay overnight, maybe longer." Grant exhaled, holding the weight of that, maybe. Wren looked up at him. "Is she dying again?" He knelt beside her. "No, she's fighting, but fighters get tired sometimes." That night, Fox Ridge felt too big. Grant didn't sleep. Wren lay curled in her bed, her stuffed bunny clutched tighter than usual. She hadn't asked for a bedtime story. She hadn't smiled since they left the hospital. Her silence was louder than any scream could have been. Grant sat in the hallway outside her door, arms folded across his knees, trying to decide if he should cry or stay calm for her sake. The decision paralyzed him. The next morning, he made pancakes. She picked at them in silence. "Wren," he said gently, "talk to me." She looked up, then away. "What if she leaves like you did?" He froze. "I didn't mean to leave, but you did." The words landed with perfect clarity. He walked around the table and knelt beside her chair. "I can't change the past, but I can stay now. I will stay now, for both of you." Her lower lip quivered. "Even if she gets worse, especially then." She nodded slowly. "Okay." He kissed her forehead. "Okay." They went to the hospital after breakfast. Nora was awake, pale but alert. When she saw them, her face lit up with something fragile but genuine. "I scared you," she said softly. "You did," Grant replied. "Don't do it again." She reached for his hand. "I used to think fighting meant pushing everyone away so I could deal with things on my own," she said. "But now I think maybe fighting means letting people stay, even if it hurts." He squeezed her hand gently. "You don't have to protect us from the truth," he said. "We're here. We're not afraid of loving you through the worst." A nurse knocked and entered quietly. She handed Nora a chart and adjusted her IV drip. Wren sat on the edge of the bed and began drawing again, this time in full color. After lunch, Grant stepped out into the hallway, needing air. The hospital corridors were full of quiet sorrow people pacing, whispering, holding coffee cups like lifelines. He sat on a bench and rested his head against the wall, eyes closed. Liza called. "I heard," she said, voice softer than usual. "How's she doing?" "Stable. Do you need me to cancel the keynote next week?" He rubbed his forehead. "No. I'll go. I can't stop everything. She might be out by then, or she might not. Either way, Wren needs to know life doesn't stop because we're scared." There was a pause. Then Liza said, "You've changed more in the last 4 weeks than most people do in 20 years. It's not change," he said. "It's remembering." The following day, Nora was discharged with strict instructions: rest, nutrition, light movement only. Grant followed every instruction like scripture. He rearranged the guest bedroom so sunlight poured in all day. He cooked soups from her childhood recipes, asking for guidance along the way, laughing when she made a face at his first attempt. He called her Mother in Maine, who cried when she heard Nora's voice on the line. He scheduled follow-up appointments. He made Wren lunch with handwritten notes inside the bag. He did it all without being asked. One night, Nora watched him from the hallway, watching him fold laundry like it was a ritual of redemption. "You don't owe me penance," she said softly. He looked up. "It's not penance. It's presence." She leaned her head against the wall. "I used to lie awake at night wondering how someone could just disappear from love." He folded another towel. "Now I lie awake hoping you won't disappear from life." She didn't reply, but the tears in her eyes answered for her. The next day, Wren brought home a school flyer family day. The children were allowed to bring parents or guardians to class, share stories, present drawings, and introduce who took care of them. Wren waved the paper like a flag. "I want both of you to come," she said proudly, "not just Mommy, both." Nora looked uncertain. "It depends how I'm feeling. I'll make sure you feel okay." Wren replied with quiet confidence. On the day of the event, Nora wore a soft blue scarf and sat beside Grant in the tiny folding chair meant for elementary school guests. The classroom smelled like crayons and apple juice. The walls were lined with self-portraits and glitter projects. Wren stood up when her turn came. "This is my mom," she said, pointing. "She's the strongest person I know. She makes soup that makes you feel better, even when you're scared." Everyone smiled. "And this is my dad," she added. "He didn't know I was here at first, but when he found me, he stayed. And that's how you know someone really loves you." Grant blinked fast. She held up a picture, 3 stick figures under a big red heart. At the bottom, in purple crayon, it said, "We are not broken. We're still becoming." The room clapped. Nora leaned over and whispered, "You okay?" He nodded, barely. Back at home that night, Wren placed the drawing on the fridge and stood back, admiring it like it was a gallery painting. "I think we're getting better," she said. Nora smiled. "At what? At being a family." Grant looked at both of them, then at the drawing. He realized it wasn't about being perfect. It was about choosing each other over and over again, even when it hurt, especially then. The letter sat on the desk for 3 days before Grant signed it. He'd written dozens of versions, some bold, some quiet, some full of remorse, others too polished to feel honest, but none had felt like him, not the man he was becoming. Until now, this one wasn't corporate. It wasn't curated. It was real. It began simply, "Dear Nora, I was a good man at building things, companies, ideas, futures. But I wasn't good at staying. I didn't know how. Until you taught me." He didn't send it as a text. He didn't email it. He printed it, folded it carefully, and placed it beside her teacup one morning before driving Wren to school. That day, the trees had begun to turn. Orange bled into the Evermere skyline like fire through fog. Wren had braided her hair herself, crooked and proud, and walked into class without turning back. It was a small thing, but it gutted him, because for the first time she wasn't afraid he'd leave. When he returned home, Nora was in the garden behind the house, sitting on a blanket near the old lilac bush. The letter was in her lap. He watched her for a moment before speaking. Too much. She looked up, her eyes soft. "No," she said, "not enough." She patted the blanket beside her. He sat down, legs outstretched, silence settling between them like an old friend. "I want to ask you something," she said after a long pause. "Anything. When the chemo's done, when I'm stronger, will you come with us? I don't mean for a week. I mean for real. Wherever we land, somewhere smaller, quieter, where Wren can run barefoot, and I don't feel like I'm pretending not to be afraid all the time." He didn't hesitate. Yes, he said. Nora tilted her head. Even if it means giving this all up. I'm not giving anything up, he said. I'm gaining something I never had the courage to want. Her lips curved gently. You're not who I thought you'd be when you came back. He smiled faintly. Neither am I. That night, after Wren fell asleep with her drawing pad on her chest, Grant sat in the sunroom alone. The moonlight came in softly. He pulled out the old box he'd hidden in the closet, the one with the 3 letters he'd never sent over the years. One was dated 6 years ago. The second was a year later. The third, just months before they met again. He opened them one by one, read every word. Then, with a quiet finality, he fed each into the fireplace, not because they didn't matter, but because he no longer needed to carry the version of himself that wrote them. He wasn't just fixing the past now. He was living the present. A few days later, the school counselor called. Wren mentioned something during art. The counselor said carefully. She said she was scared her mom's heart might go quiet forever. I think she's been internalizing a lot more than she lets on. Grant felt his stomach drop. She's been holding it in, he said. I'm not surprised, the counselor replied. She's smart, empathic. She absorbs fear like a sponge, but even sponges overflow. That evening, Grant sat beside Wren on the porch steps, the sky turning lavender above them. You know it's okay to talk to me. Right, he said. She nodded. I mean, really talk, even if it's about hard things. She looked up at him, her face unreadable in the fading light. I don't want to make anyone sad. You won't. What if Mommy's heart gets too tired? He swallowed. Then we'll love her through it. Every day. And if she gets tired, we'll hold her up. Wren leaned against him. Do you think she's scared? Yes, he said honestly, but she's not alone. Wren was quiet for a long moment. I dreamed last night that you were flying a big airplane, and me and Mommy were in the back. But then it started raining, and you turned around and said, Don't worry, I've got this. He wrapped his arm around her. That's a good dream. She nodded. I hope it comes true. Over the next few weeks, things settled into a rhythm. Nora's strength returned slowly, like sap in winter branches. She started walking around the garden again, reading aloud to Wren in the evenings, baking small batches of lemon muffins that never seemed to last more than a day. Grant kept working half from home, half from the city, but his presence never wavered. He was there for every school pickup, every doctor's visit, every quiet moment in the kitchen when no one said much but everything felt safe. Then, one morning, Wren came downstairs in a crisp blue dress, holding something behind her back. Daddy. He turned. Yes, I need your help. She pulled out a manila envelope. Inside was a letter she'd written in pencil, full of careful loops and slightly smudged lines. I want to give it to Grandma, she said, but I don't know how to send it. Grant sat on the floor and opened the envelope. It read, Dear Grandma, I hope you're not mad at Mommy. She was sad a long time and didn't tell you because she didn't want you to cry. But now we're okay. I have a daddy now and he makes pancakes that are kind of bad, but I eat them anyway. He holds Mommy's hand when she's tired. I think that's love. I hope you can come visit us one day when the flowers bloom. I will make you a picture. Love. Wren Grant blinked quickly and folded the letter again. I'll show you how to send it tomorrow, he said. She hugged him without warning, the kind of hug that made his chest ache. Later that night, he handed the envelope to Nora. She wants her to know. He said, maybe it's time. Nora stared at it, then nodded slowly. I'll call her in the morning. They sat by the fireplace after Wren went to bed. Nora leaned her head on his shoulder. You're still holding back, she said quietly. He looked down at her. From what? From believing this is real. He paused. I think I'm scared I'll wake up and be back in that penthouse. Alone, cold, making coffee for one. You're not dreaming, she said. But even if you were, I'd ask you to keep dreaming until you learn how to live inside it. He closed his eyes. Then, for the first time in years, he said aloud, I love you. And it didn't feel like a confession. It felt like a promise. The knock came just after sunset. Grant was setting the dinner table 3 plates, 3 forks, folded napkins the way Wren liked when the sound echoed down the hallway. It wasn't hurried, not loud, but intentional. Wren looked up from her drawing. Nora paused mid-stir at the stove. Grant's hand froze on the silverware. I'll get it, he said. He opened the door slowly. Standing on the porch was a woman in her mid-60s, dressed in a navy coat that looked too thin for the night air. Her hands clutched a beige purse. Her hair was a shade darker than Nora's. Hello, Grant, she said quietly. It's been a long time. He blinked, stunned. Mrs. Hollis, Eleanor, she corrected. But yes. He stepped aside wordlessly. When Nora saw her mother, she dropped the wooden spoon onto the stovetop with a soft clatter. Mom, I got the letter, Eleanor said, voice slightly trembling. Wren's letter. Wren, wide-eyed, looked between the adults, unsure if she should run or stay still. Eleanor's gaze softened. You must be Wren. Wren gave a tiny nod. I've waited 7 years to meet you, she said, but I didn't want to come until your mom wanted me to. I do, Nora whispered. Now. There was a pause, like a space had opened in the room too sacred to be rushed. Would you like to stay for dinner? Grant asked gently. Eleanor nodded, her eyes still locked on her daughter's face. I'd like that. That night, the table was fuller than it had ever been. Wren talked about school and art and her bunny's lost shoe, and Eleanor listened like each word was a stitched thread in something she was slowly mending. Nora barely ate, but she watched her mother with wary eyes, like she wasn't sure how to believe this moment was real. After dinner, Eleanor sat with Wren in the living room, looking through her drawings. Nora lingered near the window. Grant joined her. She's softer than I remember, Nora said quietly. Maybe you're stronger now, he replied. Nora glanced at him. You think people can really change that much? He looked back at the couch, where Wren was laughing at something her grandmother said. I think sometimes we have to. Later, when Wren had gone to bed and the dishes were done, Eleanor stood by the fireplace with Nora. I was angry, Eleanor said, when you left without saying why, when you didn't call, when I found out about the diagnosis from a friend instead of from you. I didn't think you'd come, Nora whispered. I thought you'd say it was my fault, that I chose wrong, that I ruined everything. Eleanor took a breath, and her voice cracked. I was scared. That's not the same as being cruel, but it can feel that way. I needed you, Nora said. I know. And now, Eleanor walked forward slowly and took her daughter's hands. I want to be part of whatever time we have. I don't need it to be perfect, just real. They embraced. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't cinematic, but it was whole. After she left that night, Grant and Nora stood on the porch, listening to the last of the gravel crunch beneath Eleanor's tires. "I wasn't expecting that," Nora said. "Neither was I," Grant admitted. "But I'm glad she came. Me too." She looked out toward the woods, then back at him. "I've been thinking," she said. "When this is over, when I'm through the treatments and strong again, I don't want to go back to just surviving. I want to build something. Maybe a nonprofit for single mothers or families who fall through the cracks." Grant nodded. "That's a legacy worth building. And you." He exhaled. "I want to take everything I've learned about control and let some of it go. Maybe step back from Ellison Ventures in time. Build a mentorship initiative. Use what I have to help someone else start from zero. Like I once did." They stood in silence, watching the stars emerge. "We get to rewrite the end," she said. "No," he corrected gently. "We get to rewrite the middle, and that's where all the real stuff happens." The next morning, Wren climbed into bed with them before sunrise. "Mommy, are you still sick?" Nora opened her eyes slowly. "A little, but I'm getting better." Wren nodded. "Okay, because I need you to come to my dance recital next week. I'm the tree that waves in the wind." Grant smiled. "That sounds important." "It is," she said. "Trees are the ones that stay." Grant blinked. Nora reached for their daughter and kissed her forehead. "Then we'll be in the front row." That day, Grant went to the city for meetings, only meetings he chose. No board drama, no media interviews, just honest talks with people about how to build companies with heart. He came back to Fox Ridge before sunset. When he pulled into the driveway, he saw Nora and Wren planting daffodil bulbs in the garden bed near the porch. Nora was wearing a wide-brimmed hat. Wren had dirt on her cheeks. They looked up at the same time and waved, and Grant, for the first time in his life, felt what home really meant. Not a penthouse view, not a polished boardroom, not a column on a Forbes list, but two people kneeling in the dirt, growing something that would outlast even him. That night, after Wren fell asleep, Nora handed him a piece of paper. "What's this?" he asked. "My new plan." He read it. It was a proposal for a foundation second path offering housing, career support, legal resources, and therapy for single parents navigating illness, loss, or abandonment. "I want to start with one house," she said. "Then maybe 3, then 10. Build a network, quiet, steady, like roots." He looked at her. "You're incredible," he said. "No," she whispered. "I'm just finally not afraid." And neither was he. The auditorium was packed. Parents fidgeted with their programs. Younger siblings balanced juice boxes on their knees. Teachers stood near the curtain, whispering directions with clipped urgency. But none of it reached Grant as clearly as Wren's voice from backstage. "Daddy." He turned around. She was in costume, a brown tunic painted with green swirls, soft fabric leaves sewn to her sleeves. Her hair was tied in a loose braid with small plastic butterflies woven in. "You look like a magical tree," he said. "I'm nervous," she whispered. "What if I forget when to sway?" He knelt in front of her. "Then sway however your heart tells you. That's what trees do. They listen to the wind." She smiled, just a little. "And if the wind doesn't come," she asked, "then be the wind." She nodded. When she disappeared behind the curtain again, Grant returned to the front row beside Nora and Eleanor. The lights dimmed. The music started. The children came out in group sunbeams, birds, rain. Then came the trees. Wren stood at stage left. She didn't rush. She didn't fidget. She closed her eyes, lifted her arms slowly, and began to move, soft, gentle, like a girl who had learned not to fear stillness. And in that moment, Grant felt something deep in his chest shift. He had spent years building towers tall enough to forget the ground, but Wren had brought him back to earth, and Nora had helped him stay. When the recital ended, Wren found them in the hallway outside the auditorium. She ran straight into Grant's arms. "Did I do okay?" "You were the most graceful tree in the forest." Nora kissed her cheek, and the bravest. They drove home under a sky full of early stars. Wren fell asleep in the back seat with her head tilted against the window, a smile lingering on her face. Nora reached across the console and took Grant's hand. "We did it," she said. He squeezed gently. "No." "She did it. But we didn't leave." "No," he said. "We stayed." The following week, Grant signed the first check for Second Path Foundation. He didn't sign it as a CEO, not as a benefactor. He signed it as a father, a partner, a man who had learned that power wasn't in controlling what people saw, but in showing up when no one else did. They bought a small building in Fall Ridge near the old bus terminal. It had peeling paint and rusted shutters, but good bones and a garden out back. Nora stood in the center of the empty front room one afternoon, sunlight falling across her shoulder. "It smells like beginnings." Wren painted a mural in the hallway. She called it "Hope Grows Here." A tree, of course, but this one had hands for roots. That summer, Eleanor moved into a small cottage down the road. She came for dinner twice a week, brought fresh flowers in a jar, and always left with a full heart and an empty dish. At Ellison Ventures, Grant handed off most of the day-to-day to a new leadership team. He still visited weekly, still mentored, but his office now overlooked the garden at Second Path. He traded glass walls for wooden ones, and it felt right. One evening, as autumn returned and the leaves began to fall again, Wren stood on the porch holding something behind her back. "I made this for you," she said to Grant. He raised an eyebrow. "Another drawing." She shook her head and handed him a shoebox. Inside was a leather-bound notebook. On the first page, in big block letters, she had written "Dad Ideas." Grant laughed softly. "What kind of ideas?" "There's a list of things I want to do together," she said, "like make pancakes without burning them, and build a tree house, and maybe take a trip somewhere with snow." He closed the book slowly. "You're really giving me this." "It's not finished," she said. "We'll write it together." He knelt down and hugged her. Tight. Nora watched from the doorway, tears in her eyes. Later that night, after Wren had fallen asleep, they sat on the back steps watching the wind move through the trees. "You ever think about what might have happened if you hadn't come back to Evermere?" Nora asked. "All the time," he replied, "and I think I'd still be successful, still wealthy, still respected, but I'd be hollow, like a room with no windows." She leaned her head on his shoulder. "And now I have roots." He looked out at the garden, the lights flickering softly along the stone path. "Do you regret any of it?" she asked. "No," he said. "Even the years we lost, they taught me what not to lose again." There was a pause. Then Nora said quietly, "You know, she never really asked to be rescued. She just asked to be seen." Grant nodded. "She saw me before I even knew who I was." Nora smiled. "Me too." A week later, Wren took her notebook to school for show and tell. She stood in front of the class, holding it high. "This is the book me and my dad are writing." She said, It's not a story with an ending yet, but we keep adding pages. Her teacher asked what kind of things were inside. Things we missed, she said, and things we won't miss again. Grant was sitting at the back of the room that day, watching from a plastic chair too small for his frame. And as he listened to her speak, as he watched her small hands turn pages they hadn't filled yet, he realized something. She'd never wanted a perfect father. She had just wanted someone who stayed, someone who showed up, someone who understood that love isn't bought or promised, it's practiced, one day at a time, one page at a time. That night, he tucked her in as the wind pressed gently against the windows. "Daddy." "Yes, I think we're good now." He kissed her forehead. "We're more than good," he said. "We're us." And in the quiet of the house, with Nora reading in the next room and the leaves rustling outside, Grant finally believed it. He had been the man who once built empires. Now he was building something far rarer, a family, and for the first time in his life, he didn't want anything more. What does it mean to be a father? Is it biology, wealth, reputation, or is it something quieter showing up when it matters, holding small hands through hard nights, and learning how to love even when you're afraid? Grant Ellison built a fortune, but nearly lost his soul. It took a small girl's honesty and a woman's strength to bring him back to earth, to remind him that power without presence is empty. From a sterile boardroom to a daffodil garden in Fallridge, from a man who vanished to one who tucked his daughter in at night and helped her plant hope, this is a story of second chances, chosen family, and rewriting the meaning of legacy. And while the world may not change overnight, one quiet act of love can create a ripple big enough to start again. If this story touched you, if you've ever longed to be seen, or stayed when it was hardest, then this journey was for you. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more true-to-heart stories that speak to your soul. And tell us in the comments, what does family mean to you? Until next time, stay kind, stay present, and stay human.